Hi everybody, welcome to Mr. Natural's Music School here in San Francisco, Haight-Ashbury area. We're picking up on where we left off last week. First a quick review, and then we'll go on from there, okay? First thing is this circle, 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6. That is the circle of thirds. And in the circle of thirds, you hear a lot of people talk about the circle of fifths. And you've got to know about the circle of fifths so you can learn to make chord progressions and do modulations and all that kind of stuff. Well, yes, that's true. But in the circle of thirds is the circle of fifths. So now, the reason I'm bringing this all up is you need to, if we're going from line to line to line to line or space to space to space to space, we're skipping over numbers. So what happens is we're skipping what's called a third. It could be a major third or a minor third. We'll work that out later. But going from 1 to 3 is skipping over 2. Going from 3 to 5 is skipping over the 4. So what's happening is we are building chords. Now if we want to go through what's called the circle of fifths, all we have to do is skip a number here on the wheel. So if I go from 1 to 5, there's your first circle of fifth. Then from 5, we go to 2. From 2, we go to 6. And from 6, we go to 3. And from 3, we go to 7. And from 7, we go to 4. And from the 4, you can see we come right back to the 1. So it builds this little almost star. It's a 7-pointed mess there. Okay, so what's happening is we're going from 1 to 5. Now, the longest ending chord progression that I know of is a thing called Jeepers Creepers, and it kind of sounds like this. It goes, let's see. So it's a 4, 7, from the 7 to the 3, to a 6, 6 to the 2, 5, 1. And most people do a 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1. If I want this 2-5-1 to be a longer ending, the next thing that comes in is your 6th chord. And you can see here is the progression of the progressions. So if I have a 3 chord, it likes to go, the 3 chord likes to go to a 6 chord. The 6 to the 2, the 2 to the 5, and then the 5 to the 1. So going 6, 2, 5, 1, or 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, or starting with a 7, so we can have our circle of fifths inside of this circle of thirds here quite easily, all right? So going backwards, 4 chord goes to a 7 chord, 7 chord goes to a 3 chord, 3 chord goes to a 6 chord, 6 chord goes to a 2 chord, 2 to a 5, and 5 to a 1. And what usually happens is these become endings. You can have an ending which is just 5, 1, 5, 1. You could have an ending which is 2, 5, 1. And that's most of jazz right there, going 2-5-1, moving to another key, 2-5-1 into another key, 2-5-1. Quite often in jazz, they just go 2-5, 2-5, 2-5, 2-5-1. Right? If you're going to add another chord to the progression, usually the 6th chord is the next thing that comes along, and it's usually a minor chord. So you got a 6 minor, 2 minor, 5 dominant to a 1 major. Okay, if we're going to add another chord into this chord progression, it's usually the 3. So then you have a 3 going to a 6, a 3 minor to a 6 minor, 6 minor to 2 minor, 2 to a dominant 5, 5 to a 1, and again 7 to 3 to 6 to 2 to 5 to 1, or 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. And there's your circle of fifths, okay? Now, what we're doing with this is we are using this as a way to number the staff. We're not using any clefs at all, so we don't have any name game to play with, okay? We're not using any sharps or flats at all, so we don't have any accidentals to deal with. All we want is the numbers 1 through 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to call all of those major intervals. From 1 to 2 is a major 2. From 1 to 3 is a major 3. From 1 to 4, we're going to call it a major 4, not a perfect 4. From 1 to 5, a major 5. From 1 to 6, a major 6. From 1 to 7, a major 7. And then from 1 to the high 1, what we call an octave, or some people call it 8. All right. If we're doing melodies, we've said that we are numbering things going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then it starts all over with a line over the top to say now it's a high 1. So there is no 8 when we're doing melodies. Then you have the 2 with a line over it, 3 with a line over it. If we want to go below, say this is where my hand is on the piano. If I want to go above, right, I have to shift my hand up to get the higher octave. But if I want to go below that, then what happens is the 7 below this, we put a line underneath it. The 6 below this, put a line underneath it. The 5 below, we put a line underneath it. And by notating music melodies this way, we can write 3 octaves of melody. Now, most instruments, as you'll see next week, what I'm going to do is pull out a bunch of woodwinds and show you on the various woodwinds what scales you can play. I've said all you need is one scale, which is true. You only need one scale to start learning to do this and to read most music. But you should have 2. And the reason for that is, in music, when you analyze songs, you'll see that the melodies are usually confined, for we mere mortals, to a 1 octave range. Most people can only sing 5 notes. Add 3 more notes and you've got an octave. So when you train yourself a little bit, and songs go from a 1 all the way up to a high 1 within the octave. And you'll see a lot of songs just work between these 2 numbers. But if you look at Christmas carols, for instance, and I don't know why most Christmas carols do this, I think it's because they're actually playing in what's called the Mixolydian mode. But most Christmas carols will go from a low 5 to a high 5 with the 1 in the middle. So the song will go from a low 5 up to a high 5 and back. A good example of that is Amazing Grace, or a bugle song. 5 1 5 1 3 5 1 3 5 1 3 5 1 3 1 3 5 3 1 5 5 5 1. So the taps and reveille and a lot of things you hear on the bugle are actually going from 5 to 5 with 1 in the middle. So since songs come in these 2 variations, we're going to be mostly concerned with going from 1 to 1 at first right now. Later on, we'll be singing notes below that, and we'll be singing notes above that, so we'll be able to go from 5 to 5. So because of this, you need 2 scales. You need one scale which goes from 1 to 1, and then you need another scale which goes from 5 to 5. So a good example of this on the keyboard would be if we play in the key of C, and this is C, and this is the high C. What happens is we can move down to the key of G and play from G to G and map in all the notes below C. G, A, B, and then C. And then what happens is we're playing literally in what's called the Mixolydian mode. The difference between the C and the G is the G requires on the F here to have a single sharp, an F sharp. So you'll have to play 1 accidental. But if you do this, From 1 to 1, you'll get your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And over here, 5, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. By adding that F sharp, what you can do is get a scale, which is going from G to G and giving us our 5 to 5. So you might have to put one accidental in there. Now, instruments, as we'll find out next week, especially woodwinds, they come in various varieties. For instance, recorders. Recorders are usually stacked. The soprano is in the key of C, but when you go to the next one, it's in the key of F. Then you go to the next size, it's in the key of C again. You go to the next size, it's in the key of F. So they're going C, F, C, F, C, F, C, F, C, F, like that. But when you do things like strings, for instance, the violin, the lowest string is a G, and then when you add the next thing, the viola, they add a string below that, a fifth below that, which is the C. So then the lowest string starts with a C. Then you go to the next instrument, right? Again, you have, you're in the key, key of C. And then you go down to the next one and you're in G. So they're going C, G, C, G, C, G, C, G, C, G, all the way on down for the various sizes. In other words, when they go from one size to the next, they don't jump in octaves, they jump in a half an octave. Then the next instrument is a half an octave longer than that, and the next one's a half an octave longer than that. So what's going to be happening is the two scales that you're probably going to need on the recorders would be the C and the F to play the two things. On strings like viola and the violin, you'll be switching from the G scale or the D scale to the C scale or G scale on the cello, for instance. So they're playing basically one string off from each other. Instruments like the guitar, the strings from one string to the next is a fourth. From E and A is 4 notes. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. It's 4 notes away. And then from A, B, C, D. So from A to D, again, is 4 notes. If we look at the mandolin, I think the lowest is G, isn't it, on that? Yeah, and it has the exact same tuning as you have on the violin. So you have the G, and then the next string is D. Then the next string is A, and next one's E, etc. So the mandolin is strung in fifths as well, but the guitar is done in fourths. Of the stringed instruments, the violins, viola, cello, the bass, the stand-up bass, is in fourths. It has the same tuning as the bottom 4 strings on the guitar. So you got the E, A, D, and G, and you have the same tuning on the big stand-up bass. So of all the bowed instruments in the orchestra, they go 1 5 1 5 1 5, but then along comes the bass double bass, and it's in fourths. Okay, and so you'll see this happening throughout music. So again, if I'm going to learn to play the trumpet, you would play what's called the trumpet C scale, and then what you'd do is you'd learn to play something like the G scale, and or the C scale and the F scale, either those, fourths or fifths apart. And then you'll have the 2 scales that you need, and one of those scales will be normal, the normal tuning of the instrument, and the other one will have one accidental in it in order to get the 2 different band ranges widths that we need. Okay, more of that and demos next week. All right, now this pattern, besides rotating it this way and going up the staff, you really need to memorize it going this way. Although this spells chords, 1 3 5 or 1 3 5 7, your major 1 chord, it also has to learn to say this backwards. 1 6 4 2 7 5 3 1 6 4 2 7 5 3 1 6, etc. And by being able to rotate it backwards, you'll be able to spell your chords from the top note down. So if I want to do a 1 major 7th chord, I would start with a 7 and go backwards to the 5, to the 3, and to the 1, and that would give me the spelling for my C major chord. If I want to play a 2 chord, it's 2 4 6 1 if I'm adding a 7th to that. A D minor seventh, for instance, would be 2, 4, 6, 1. Again, I have to be able to rotate that backwards and go 1, 6, 4, 2 in order to play that chord coming down the scale. Now, numbering, same. If I decide that this is where the number 1 is, then right above it, that line is going to be 3, because we're skipping. And then we're going to skip to 5, and then we're going to skip to 7, and then 1 winds up moving from the line to the space. And so what happens is if we continue this pattern, the next line becomes 2. And if I draw a line above that, it's going to become the number 4. And if I draw 2 lines above that, there's the 6. And if I draw 3 lines, there's our 1 up there. So we're going from here up to there is 2 octaves. If, however, I were to take this and put it on a space, let's say I put it on this space here, the number 1, then the spaces become 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, and your 1. So 1 will either start on a line or start on a space. The other thing is what happens when the line or the space is here in the middle of the staff. When it winds up being in the middle of the staff, then you have to really learn how to rotate this thing backwards. So let's say this is where 1 is. So this would be 3, 5, put a line above that, 7. Rotating backwards, the line below is going to be 6, and the line below that is going to be 4. And if we put a ledger line down here, it's going to be 2. So you'll see 1 is right there. And you can see 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6. And that's what we dealt with last week, was this numbering thing. Now, what's really important here is for your eye to be able to pick up the numbers really quickly and read them on the staff. There are 3 levels, again, to doing this. The first level is to just see it as an integer floating anywhere, okay? So we just want to calibrate our eye to see the distance between 2 notes. Now, the interesting thing is, if we were to break these into odd and even groupings, what you're going to wind up with is there's a third, there's a fifth, and there's a 7th. There is no 1 because 2 notes on the same line or 2 notes under this thing, it's called a unison. There's no interval there really to deal with. So what you have is you only have 3 odd intervals. You have, let's say this is where 1 is. You have the third, which is small. You have the fifth, which is medium-sized. And then you have the 7th, which is large, okay? Small, medium, and large. And instead of taking and counting and going 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, instead of counting like that, what we want you to do is get away from the left brain, which is doing all this counting and this mathematics and is the great accountant in our brain. And we want to move it over into the right brain, and the right brain feels things and estimates things. So we're looking to turn it into an estimate instead of, or a guess. And the way you guess is by the size. So you have to get the physical size in your eye. So just like a carpenter uses their thumb to get an inch, and then when you want to measure things, that's 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches. So from there to there is 6 inches because 6 thumbs, right? My thumb happens to be exactly 1 inch wide because I'm the same size as the King of England that they got our measurements from. He was 6 feet tall, weighed 175 pounds, okay? Had a 12-inch foot, had from the tip of this finger to the tip of this finger stretched out is 6 feet, okay? So all these measurements, the fathom and stuff like that, came from a person, the King of England. And I happen to be, I weigh more, but I'm the same height, exactly 6 feet tall. And people who are exactly 6 feet tall, generally they have all these measurements built in. Going from there to there with your hands stretched out is about 9 inches, okay? And 2 of those is 18, right? So what happens is a carpenter learns to get this size, this thumb size in their eyeball, and they can look at something and say, oh, that's 41 inches, or that's 32 inches. And they can guess within a quarter of an inch, an eighth of an inch, some people, okay? So they change their guess to an estimate. Same thing here. What we need to do is learn to estimate these by size. Small, medium, and large. 3, 5, 7. Now when we're dealing with the evens, we have the same thing. We have seconds, we have fourths, and we have sixths. And from the line to the second is small. And from the line or space wherever one is up to the fourth, this is a medium size. And from the line to here, this is large. So again, we have small, medium, and large. So there's only 6 sizes. And what you need to do is get those sizes into your eyeball. All right, I'm going to show you the way to do that right now. The simplest way to do that is to, turn the camera towards me, is to make up cards like this, which have the staff on it. And then I have free-floating here these two notes, which are an interval. You'll see going from a line to a line, or from a space to a space, is always going to be an odd number. So if it looks even, it's an odd number. And that's why we have to use the flashcards, because when we look at something, our eye tries to take over and says, the left brain's going, oh, that goes from a line to a line, it must be even. Oh, it looks like it's going from a space to a space, it looks even. But it's not. In music, what looks even is an odd number. And what looks odd, going from a line to a space or a space to a line, becomes an even number. And we use the flashcards to break this bias down. So let's take a look for those of you who've never done this before. You'll see here, you can tell a third, it goes from the line to the line, or it goes from this space to that space, or this space to that space, or this line to that line, or that space to that space. And it will always have just a single space, or if it goes from here to here, I'll have a single line in between. They're right next to each other, kind of like building a snowman, okay? And so what we have here is what's called a third. So that is small. The next interval here is a 5, or a fifth. And you'll see it's going from, again, a line, skipping that line, going to the next line. Or it could be here on this space, it would skip that space and go to the next space. And that would be a 5. And you can see it's just medium-sized. So you think of it as medium-sized and get a feel for that. The next thing here is we have, see, going from a space to a space. And when we go from this space to that space, you'll see there are 2 spaces and 2 lines in between. If we're going from this line to that line, there'll be 2 lines and what looks like 2 spaces in between. So if you can stick your fingers through it, you know, or drive, as my mother used to say, if you can drive a truck through it or, you know, a caravan through it, then it's wide. So this is large. So now, just get that size in your eyeball. Small, medium, large. A 3, a 5, or a 7. So let's take a look now at this. You'll see that that is got a lot of real estate in there. So that is a 7. The next one here, you see, doesn't have as much real estate. It's medium sized. So that's a 5th. This one is tiny, small, so it is a 3rd. And what I'm going to do is just flash them by here. There is a 7. There's a 5. There's a 3. There's a 5th. There's a 7th. There's a 5. There's a 3rd. There's another 3rd. And in another place, here's another 3rd. So in other words, the bottom note is always the number 1, all right? And we just feel the size. That's a 7th. That's a 7th. Ledger lines are harder to read, but did you see still a lot of real estate? 7. 7. A 5. A 3rd. A 3rd. A 5th. A 7th. A 3rd. A 5th. A 7th. A 3rd. 5. 5. 7. 5. 3. 7. 5. 3. 5. 7, 5, 3, 3, 3, 7, 7, 7, 7, 5, 3. Now, as I went faster, you probably weren't able to keep up. What I recommend is you go down into my playlist, and in the playlist, you'll see a playlist that it says visual training. And that's what these are, flashcards for visual training. And if you go through the visual training, what I do is we start with the odd intervals, and we do them, and as I turn them over, I'll wait 3 seconds and then give you the answer. The next time through, I'll wait 2 seconds, give you the answer, and then I'll wait 1 second, give you the answer. Then the next couple ones after that, I don't give you the answer. And each time I go faster and faster until finally I should be able to move these as fast as possible. And what will happen is, based on this feeling, you'll say, that's a third, that's a seventh, that's a fifth. And that's what we want, is for you to get that feeling, okay? Now, when you do that, what happens is you're reading by interval, essentially. The next thing is even numbers. So go get that training, and you'll see that it really helps to get you to pick up some speed. Now, if it's going from a line to a space or a space to a line, it's an even number. And again, the 2 is small. You see there's a little space in there, there's a line and a space in there, that's a 4. So it's medium. 4 is medium. We look here, 2 lines, 2 spaces in between. That's a 6. And again, you see it's going from a line to a space, or it can go from a space to a line. So that's a 4th. So, I mean a 6th. So there's a 6th, there's a 4th, there's a 2nd. Take a look at the next one. 6, 2, a 2nd, 6, 4, a 2nd, 2, 4, a 4th. Tricky with the ledger lines. Still a 4th, medium sized. Big 6, big 6, medium 4, squeezed together tiny, a 2, a 4, a 4, a 2, a 6, a 4, a 2, a 6, a 6, 6, 4, 2, 6, 2, 6, 4, and 2. And again, what happens is after we do the odd numbers, I then show you how to do this. Instead of them floating around freely, what we will do is choose either a space or a line as a reference, and then we'll measure everything from that reference. And that's the next level of learning to do this, basically reading the intervals in a key, all right? So, now the thing is you have to keep them separate, the odds and the evens separate to start with, because they're hard to see otherwise. So if I were to put the flashcards up here and tell you that, okay, in this pile here are odd numbers, and then over in this thing are even numbers, odds and evens, well, you'll be able to tell that's a third, that's a fifth, that's a seventh. Over here, that's a 2. There's a 4. There's a 6. There's a 2. There's a 6th. There's a 7th. There's a 7th. There's a 7th. There's a 3rd. Over here, evens. 2. Medium, 4. Large, a 6, even though it's going on ledger lines. A 6. Over here, 3, 3, 5, 7, 5, 3, over on the even sides, 6, 2, 4, etc., etc., and so forth, as they say in the King of I. So doing the flashcard drills is going to get this thing into your eye. Now, another thing that you should practice visually is to please go to Amazon.com, and at Amazon.com you will find my music book, Music Theory Decoded, strictly by the numbers, by Mr. Natural and Lynn Vani. And in here we teach this entire method. It starts by using the number codes as a way to teach you to do all the spellings for your ABCs, even to the most difficult and complicated forms of spellings there are. There are actually 35 spellings of the major key if you use sharps, double sharps, and sometimes triple sharps, double flats, triple flats, etc. So there are 35 spellings for the major scale, and this starts out by showing you how to use the number code to be able to enumerate these things and then turn them into ABCs. So please go and get my book. Inside of that book is this thing called the intervalometer. And this intervalometer, it sits on the piano keys behind the black keys and stands up really nice, and you can move it around. So here we are in the key of D. I can move it around here into the key of A. I can move it into either A flat or G sharp, and I can learn to do the spellings with this. On the other side, we have the minor. So you see here we are in A minor, right? Here we are in C minor. Here we are in F sharp minor or G flat minor. And this by itself is a PDF that will be in the dibly-do below. So if you go down into the description in the dibly-do, you'll see a link to my website for this, and you can download this and print it out. I suggest instead of paper you use a little bit thicker cardstock, like the kind they use for making business cards, and you print it on this thicker paper, and then when you cut it out, these things will automatically register, and you can build up a slider that's 6 octaves long for a 7-octave keyboard. So now let's see how well we did at teaching this. So let me get my red pen out. Here we have the odd intervals, and down here I have the even intervals, and they're just floating freely. So let's take a look. From this space to that space is a third. From here to here, line to line, is a third. From here to here, there's one line. You can see in between it, so this is a 5. You can see from this space to that space, that is a 5. You can see here a larger distance. We have 2 lines or 2 spaces in between. This is a 7th. You can see the same thing here, a 7th. Over here, a third. Medium, 5. Large, 7. Medium, 5. Large, a 7th. Medium, small, 3. Large, a 7th.
Your second 7th is actually an octave.
Where? That one?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Wait a minute. That's not right.
Should be the top
1, 3,
line.
5, 6, 1, 3, 5, 7. Oh, it should be on that line. Sorry. Should go from a line to a line, space to space. Thank you, Angel. Okay, let's look down here. From this line to that line, a 5. From space to space, a 7. Line to line, a 3. Space to space, 3. Large, line to line, 7th. Space to space, 5. Line to line, a third. line to line, a seventh. You see we have this, ledger lines tend to float and they're harder to see. 1, 3, 5, 7. 1, 3, 5, 7. 5. 1, 3, 5, 7, ledger line again. See, tends to look smaller than it really is. 7th, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. So again, by the size, you can feel this and let your right brain trigger the answer rather than your busy left brain. Now down here we have evens. You see if it goes from a line to a space, it's a 2. It's still small. Going from a space to a line, it's a medium size, so it's a 4. It's going from a line to a space, and it's larger, so it's a 6. So you have 2, 4, and 6. This is 2, medium, 4, medium, 4, 6, 6, 2, 4, 6, 6, 2, 4, 6, and 2. Down here, from here to there, it's a second. There to there is a 4th. From there to there is a 6. From here to there is a 6. Again, you see these ledger lines tend to make this thing look smaller. So you have to really notice. And if you wind up with 2 ledger lines, it can really fool your eye. Okay, medium, 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 small, medium, small, small, medium, large, large, small. Okay, can you see? So now these are just floating all over the place. What we're going to do is, if you had this in one spot, for instance, if I say to you that this line here, all the way along here, that line is going to be our number 1, right? Then you can judge the distances from that. For instance, from here to there, it's an even number because it's going from a line to a space, so this is a 2. Going up here, from a line to a line, that's a 3. Going up here, from here to there, that's a 5. Going from here to there, that's a 4. Going from here to here, a 2nd. Going from here to here, it's a 3rd. Going from here to there, that's a 5th. Going from here to there, that's a 7th. Going from here to here, that's a 6th. Going from here to there, 5. Going from here to there, 3. From here to there, a 4th. From here to there, a 2nd. So what we're doing in this case is we're measuring every one of these to that line. So that line becomes our fixed position and it is being locked down, so we would call this the key. This line going all the way across would be our key. And then we would measure from that key, the number 1, up to each of these. And if it goes from a line to a space or a space to a line, it's going to be an even number. And if it looks the same, line to line, or line to line, or line to line, it's an odd number. If it goes from a line to a space, or it goes from a line to a space, it's an even number. Okay? So what you have to do is then, after you've learned to do these with the flashcards, then you learn to do this with one line or one space as your reference. Okay, so that's it for this week. I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. And you can see here we're getting closer and closer and closer to having this go over into the right brain. That visual training is crucial. Learning to do the odd numbers first and the even numbers second. And then having 2 piles of them and not mixing them together. It takes a while to be able to mix them together. You've got to break down this tendency that when something looks the same, you have to call it an odd number. And when it looks different, we have to call it an even number. So again, there's only six intervals to practice, right? 6 intervals to practice. And once you practice those, and they're always small, medium, and large. Small, 3, small, 2. Medium, 4 or 5. Large, a 6th or a 7th. All right? So until next time, we'll see you next week. I'm going to pull out some musical instruments here. We'll start with the woodwinds, and I'm going to show you what natural keys that you can play in on each of these instruments and what 2 scales you can choose so you'll know what key you're in when you're playing. And I'm not talking about the key you learn on the saxophone where you read the staff, or on the trumpet where you read the staff. Those people are being taught a lie. If they pull up a digital meter and we look at the digital meter to see what note they're playing, when the trumpet is playing what he thinks is his C, the digital meter is going to say it's an A sharp or a B flat because the horn is cut to B flat. So the natural C scale on the trumpet is actually the B flat scale. So it's what we sound, not what we read. And since we're not using ABC, it doesn't matter. All we need to do is know what the actual sound is, so we know what the key is, so we can play along with the other instruments that are in concert pitch. All right, see you next time. So long, everybody. Count to 10.